It is now my pleasure to introduce our next contributor, Dr. Gerald Taylor. Dr. Taylor is a former lecturer and researcher in politics and government, having worked at La Sainte Union College in Southampton and at the University of Glamorgan. He resides in the South Wales Valleys with his wife Sylvia, where they receive occasional visits from their 4 children. Dr. Taylor has been active in local political and social groups for a long time and has attempted to create non-profit organizations to improve the quality of media and debate on the internet. Since the end of last year, he has worked for Catholic Concern for Animals as a membership manager. So over to you, Gerald, and welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to be here. And first of all, can I say it's great to see so many people here. Many of the names I recognise and have had correspondence with. It's good to see you, but also quite a few people whose names I don't recognise. So let me just say in one of my roles with CCA that if you want to join us in CCA, then please pop along to our website at www.catholic-animals.com and come and join us and help us to organise these things. I also like to thank our CEO, Chris Fegan, for giving me the job of pronouncing on CCA's views on sentience of fish, which I should state at the outset, I have absolutely no intention of doing. As our chair has indicated, my doctorate, as I'm rather formally titled, Dr. Gerald Taylor here, is in government, not in marine biology. And if you want a definitive answer to those questions, then I suggest you select a different expert to me, because those were the kind of people that our previous speaker was indicating. That said, my own personal, I'm given a title which is Fish the Forgotten Species. And for me, I grew up in the 1960s and 1970s in a small seaside fishing village in Devon, whose main occupation is understandably tourism. But even in my lifetime, there used to be the occasional fishing event where a rather sad group of 5 or 6 gentlemen in long green boots would jump into rowboats and row out into the river with a net and do a navigation of the river, come back to the beach and then haul the net ashore. And I remember as a youth watching these gentlemen dragging up a very small, a very meagre collection of fish, and now it's even more meagre because those and as a result those practices have finished. We did have them replaced with various groups of people seeking to farm shellfish in the river. But perhaps one of my most important memories of fish actually came from the fairs that used to visit, which were a highlight of the year for me, Teignmouth and Sholden. And I would visit these fairs with the money I could get my parents to give me. And at most of the stalls, up round the edge of the stall would be hanging clear plastic bags with a small amount of water in, and a poor, lonely orange goldfish swimming around in each one. I didn't give these fish much attention, but I did win one once. I can't remember how, but I did. I was so neglectful of the poor creature that it took someone else to take it home for me rather than me myself. And this poor little goldfish was given one of those archetypal globe glass bowls with no adornment to live out its rather lonely life, with its only excitement in the day being an occasional pinch of food, which it would be allowed. I used to think nothing of this. That for me, these kind of behaviour, this callous view of fish, was justified by the accepted wisdoms of the time, of the place in which I lived. For a start, we all knew, everybody knew, that fish only had a memory which lasted seconds. How could a fish get bored in a goldfish bowl when it could remember 3 or 4 seconds ago? It just swam around and everything was new to it again. At least that's what I believed. We knew that fish didn't feel pain. My angling friends were telling me this every time I saw them. Of course they don't feel pain. They wouldn't keep on coming back if they did. We knew that they had no personality. They were expressionless. They had faces which didn't give any kind of emotional clue. They had no limbs to provide us with any kind of idea of a personality. And that was the kind of idea of fish that I grew up with. Apart from, as I said, seeing them dragged up onto the beach or occasionally viewing one in the river as I wandered over Teignmouth Bridge, they were not part of my life. And I think for most people, fish are truly alien creatures. They live on the same planet with us, but they are not in the same world as us. They live in a different media, in a media which is very difficult for us to be involved in. We cannot breathe in water. We go to any depth and pressure will kill us. It's a very hostile media for us. And we cannot relate to fish the same way we can to, say, sheep, cows, rabbits, dogs, who we do share many other things with. Fish are truly alien to us. And the moral parameters that were set in those days didn't really help either. For in terms of religion, fish were seen as acceptable replacements for meat on feast days. They were seen as in the Bible as something which was there. They were not did not have the same status as animals which one sacrificed. They were not the same kind of creatures. But things were changing. Things have changed over the last 40 years. And in fact, I mean, things were changing for me alongside seeing these fish where I lived and where I grew up. The other experience of fish was on my black and white television, seeing a gentleman by the name of Jacques Cousteau in his boat, the Calypso. And Cousteau was one of the first people and an important person in terms of developing technology to actually go and explore the planet, the world in which these creatures lived. He developed new techniques of underwater photography and used those that had already been developed. And he became one of the first people to present the water world to us in a way that we could actually share, albeit virtually, some kind of experience with these creatures. And you may say, well, that was just, insignificant piece of TV. But let's remember how important David Attenborough's Blue Planet 2 has been to our awareness of plastic pollution. And without that program, we may not have been as aware of not just plastic pollution in the ocean, but also plastic pollution on land. So these things can make an effect and have been important. Indeed, the link between media world and exploration is probably emphasized by the fact that back in 2013, the first solo dive to the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench was undertaken not by a marine biologist, but by a filmmaker, James Cameron, he of Avatar fame. And that link, I think, has been very important in terms of raising awareness of what's going on in the undersea world. One feels that, you know, if only David Attenborough could make programs about the noise pollution and the chemical pollution, which is also going on of our waterways, that might help too, but yeah, better not push it, I guess. Another thing which has been going on is that questions were asked about research. There has been a lot of developed research in over the past 40 years in terms of fish and their behavior and the marine biology more generally. And if you want, I kind of dismissed the idea of me talking about sentience of fish earlier, but if you do want to think about, to look at some kind of discussion of the sentience of fish, then I recommend Jonathan Balcom's book, What Fish Know, because that actually he does argue that fish are sentient, and he does explore a lot of the research that has gone on in terms of the way fish understand their environment, the sensory perceptions they have, and the importance, for example, of noise pollution to them, but also senses that we don't possess, like the ability to sense electrical fields of other organic creatures and things of that nature. And fish are absolutely amazing creatures. One of the things he definitely dispels is this idea that fish, or at least all fish, only have a memory of 2 or 3 seconds. Some fish are capable of remembering underwater landscapes, which enable them to escape predation when the tide has gone out and all that's left is rock pools. I don't think any human I know would have so much the ability to do that. But if you want to have a look at sentient fish, go and have a look at Jonathan Balcom. He and other people like Victoria Braithwaite with her book Do Fish Feel Pain have changed the way that we see fish and the attributes of fish, their abilities. And it is now widely accepted that fish do feel pain, although the argument has changed slightly into saying, well, they don't feel human pain. Well, for me, pain is pain. But the important thing is that we are beginning to understand, but it's to use an appropriate metaphor, a drop in the ocean. We certainly do not understand most of the oceans and the waterways which cover our world. And we do not acknowledge, respect the damage that we are doing to them with the fishing techniques and the use of waterways as a garbage system, which we have undertaken. Much of this research has been driven by a third change, which has happened in the last 40 years, and that's been the rise of aquaculture, the farming of fish for consumption. 40, 50 years ago, fish farming was a small proportion, a fraction of the amount that was harvested by wild fishing. It's grown to the extent that it is likely soon to take over in terms of tonnage, because, as Chris mentioned, that is the way these poor creatures are measured. Tonnage of fish consumed in the coming decades. Fish farming, aquaculture has become much more important. And alongside that has come the need to understand fish in order to maximize the yield and the profit from these ventures. And in particular, issues like exercise, because these fish are kept in nets or in containers and do not have to swim or need to swim hundreds, thousands of miles as fish in the wild do, and do not create the same kind of meat, same kind of flesh that they would if they did so. So there's issues like that and the problems that creates fish. But the more important one, and certainly one which has become significant for aquaculture, is the one of parasites. Within aquaculture with fish kept particularly in open water, in nets, parasites have a field day. You have fish crammed into a small space where they cannot get away, and they cannot obtain the kind of normal cleaning from other fish, from other marine animals, which is available, would be available to them in the wild. As a result, there are some truly horrific accounts and pictures of fish almost literally being eaten alive in these conditions by their parasites. And this isn't just the odd cowboy producer. There was a case in the last few weeks in a Scottish fish farm, which is approved by environmental agencies. So these kind of issues, the need to understand fish became more important, and also our awareness of fish became more significant through our television screens, and occasionally through holidays where we went scuba diving and stuff. We began to know these creatures more. Within as I said, the moral scope, we've had an increase in awareness of fish because of this idea that fish have sentience, that fish have awareness, that fish have many more attributes. And certainly one of the things that we need to consider is that we do not know, we do not understand the richness of the oceans, what the oceans, how they work, what they do, the kind of environments down there. We have no idea of how even relatively accessible marine environments like coral reefs work. All we know is that they are being damaged, and they are at the point of collapse in some cases. But it's like the Amazon in that we destroy the Amazon without knowing what's there. We are destroying our oceans and waterways without knowing what's there. It's with the kind of approach in terms of animal sentience and fish sentience. This puts us back in terms of an idea of examining animals, examining fish with respect to ourselves. Fish were decried when I was a boy. Fish were neglected because they didn't have the attributes that we have. They couldn't use language, and gorillas could, dolphins could, but fish couldn't. They didn't use tools, although we know now that some of them do, like some of the higher apes, and so on. So that they were denied consideration. They were denied the idea of rights because they were not close enough to us. And for us in CCA, and for myself personally, one of the things that Laudato Si says to us is that we need to regard all of creation as important, including, as Tebaldo was saying, things like microbes, fungi, but fish as an important part of creation, an important part of the world in which we live. We should not value things because they are like us. We should not value things because they do work which we think is important. We should value them because they are part of the creation in which we live. We ourselves are part of this creation, and we need to respect our position in creation, to understand that whilst we may be the measure of things, we are not the judge of things. We should not decide what should continue and what shouldn't on the basis of our needs. The problems with this are difficult. When I was teaching 20, 30 years ago, in sociology, there used to be a popular idea called risk theory. And what risk theory argues is that in areas like our involvement with the natural world, we simply cannot, it is impossible to understand the complexity of the natural world in a way that we understand the repercussions of our decisions. So that what we do to the natural world, we cannot know what the repercussions of that are. I remember going to a Labour Party meeting where risk theory was was raised and as one of the questions, and somebody was asked how a Labour government would deal with risk theory, and they said they would fully risk assess everything they did, which of course completely misunderstood the problem. In damaging our marine environment, we are damaging creation, we are damaging the whole, and we do not know. We are limited beings, incapable of understanding the full importance, the full significance of that. We should also respect this because it is part of the creation just as much as we are. And we need to bring fish from being the forgotten species, from being underwater creatures about which we know little, to being something which we treasure and allow to grow and develop and become more significant within themselves. This is actually a difficult task because even now, even with David Attenborough, we still know very little about what is in the seas, and to some extent little about what is in the rivers. We have some idea of the kind of development of the marine world, but we do not know much about what is at any depth in the ocean. Going to the bottom of the ocean and seeing snapshots, brief pictures, little little glimpses into what goes on down there does not give us an understanding of those worlds. And the discovery of things like hydrovents actually raises a lot of questions in terms of the kind of development of marine biology and the development of marine life, and indeed the development of life on Earth itself. We need to stop taking fish for granted, start realizing that they are an important part of our creation, and begin to allow them to grow and develop and be the kind of creatures they are capable of being. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gerald, for this, great presentation, for giving us a personal account of the relationship that you had with fish growing up, which is probably shared by many of us, and how different researchers, telling us how different researchers have been changing these very limited perceptions of fish and marine life, and our understanding of their sentience and complexity. And also thank you for the for sort of reminding us of the risk of our behavior incurs without us even understanding the extent and the significance of the impact that we have. So thank you for that. If I may just sort of mention a very quickly a personal anecdote. I am a witness of the fact that goldfish actually have a much longer memory than people believe. When I moved to the house in which I am now, there was already a pond in the garden with fish, and I had to decide what to do with. I didn't want to evict them. They were there before me. I decided to keep the pond, and I formed some, some sort of relationship with these fish. And every winter you have to stop feeding them, otherwise their food could rot in their intestines and could kill them. And I can every time that we resume the feeding season, they remember to come around me when I join when I go to the pond, because they know the food is coming, and I only approach the pond, start approaching the pond again when it's time to feed them. And so they, from at the distance of 4 months, they remember what is happening, what is about to happen when I approach the pond. Anyway, so this was just a very quick and simple, anecdote from my daily life with fish. So I would now like to open the the floor to questions. So I wonder, Chris, what our audience would like to ask Dr. Taylor.
Okay, thanks, Clara. I'm still waiting for the first question, I think. I think people have been waiting for your sort of signal for them to ask their questions. So the floor is now open. Please ask Gerald any questions on his presentation, and indeed anything else possibly you might wish to regarding CCA and our fish project, and we'll try and cover those subject matters. So I await your questions. I think something's coming through. Here we are. Thank you. So this is a question from Anton Imink. Is the focus only fish for you, or would you consider shrimps too?
The focus, Anton, is fish, because the title of my talk was "Fish: The Forgotten Species." I think we need to look at the whole marine system, and indeed the whole of creation. As I said, fish, and we need to kind of, as Jonathan Balcom says in his book. I mean, we tend to kind of like say fish when there are trillions and trillions of fishes around the world. I'm not going to start calling fishes because I'm not used to that, and I get mixed up with my grammar. But fish are very different. They have different roles in marine biology. They do different things. There are lots of different types of fish, and they live in different environments. Shrimps too actually live in different environments within the marine world and do different things and have different attributes. I think we need to look at all creatures with a view to understanding those creatures and what is best for them within creation as a whole, and that's one of the reasons that I think CCA's approach is so important. As Chris said before, at CCA we do not just look at some creatures, we do not just look at the cuddly ones or the ones who are more like us. We are concerned with all life, with all creatures on Earth, and fish are very important, shrimps are very important, the whole marine ecosystem is important, and we don't understand fully what it does, and yet we are destroying it.
Thank you for that, Gerald. If I could just add as well, this is in a few words. This is why we do not forget shrimps or anything on any other creature, which is why we entitled this conference "Fish and Marine Welfare." So, although the focus of Gerald's talk was on fish, the forgotten species, it is fish and marine welfare. So I just want to mention that the point of the conference, actually, fish is a focus, but marine welfare is also included. A next question, again from my colleague Paul, and Paul says, "Don't forget the book of Helen Scales, a marine biologist from Cambridge. Book is Eye of the Shoal, a fishwater's guide to life, the oceans, and everything," which, in Paul's opinion, is as interesting as Balcom. And before Gerald comes in, just to I'll put my video on. Sorry, just to prove that we haven't forgotten that book. Here it is. Here it is. So we do have that in the CCA library, if I can put it that way. So we haven't forgotten that book. So I hope that answers. Sorry to answer on your behalf there, Gerald.
That's okay, Chris.
As I had it to hand, I thought I would just show that we haven't forgotten that book and we are working with it.
Yeah. Yeah, Chris has it and he hasn't lent it to me yet. But I think that, you know, the point I would make is there is a lot of good material out there. I mentioned Victoria Braithwaite and Jonathan Balcombe. Balcombe actually summarizes a lot of different research in his book, but there's far more and far more than I could tell you about. You know, I mean, just go and you know, it's important to invest some time in understanding our world, and you know, reading is a good way to do that.
Right, the next question is from Alfred Shiwa. And how can we transfer the knowledge that you share, Gerald, to help young people so that they understand sentiency in fish and other marine animals?
Well, I would say that I think young people understand that far better than I do. As I said, I grew up in a time when fish were really neglected and dismissed, and I think that people nowadays are far more conscious of the marine world, partly because of the things they see on TV, partly because of the holidays they take, than I was when I was growing up, even though I grew up in a seaside town where fishing was still an activity. I think that one of the things that we need to do is to engage with young people and actually begin to build with them ways in which we can create an argument and a way forward which brings together the idea of protecting, giving fish a new dimension in our politics and our understanding, alongside doing that with the whole of creation, understanding that human beings are part of that creation and that we need to fit in and not destroy our neighborhood.
Thank you. I'll go on to the next question, which is from Lynn Snedden. The fish pain skeptics have always used brain structure as an argument against fish perceiving pain. One must have a human-like brain, so only humans and maybe primates can feel pain. However, their most recent opinion is that they don't know if fish feel pain. What would you say to them to change their mind?
Well, what I'd be inclined to say to them is I don't care whether fish feel pain or not. They are part of the world in which we live, and we should regard them with dignity and with care, because they are part of that creation and part of that world, as we should with everything in the world around us. So for me, I really don't. I'm not bothered about whether fish feel pain or not, but I think the research in recent years has become far clearer. The fact that people who have some interest in saying that fish don't feel pain because they want to inflict pain upon fish are saying, well, there may be reasons to believe that they do, but it's not human pain. I think that we need to say, well, if there is a chance that creatures are feeling any pain whatsoever, then we should be taking that into account. It should be a precautionary principle. We should not inflict pain, even when we are not sure whether we're inflicting pain or not.
Next question is from, bear with me a second, from Lorraine Platt. Thanks, Gerald, for a fascinating talk. Can you remind us of the authors' names again on the books you recommended on fish sentience? Thank you.
It's Jonathan Balcombe, What Fish Know, and the one on pain is Victoria Braithwaite, Do Fish Feel Pain? But as I've already mentioned, there's lots more books out there and lots more reading. You know, please go and have a look. And there's there's some very good stuff on Wider Marine Worlds. People mentioned octopuses before. There's some good material on that, and on various marine life. So go and explore.
Right, the next question is from Johnson Geckley. I would like to thank Dr. Taylor for the presentation. Absolutely, to stop killing or eating fish and feed on vegetables would be the answer to prevent the destruction of fish and marine life generally. But since it is impossible, is the domestication of fish or fish farming the answer?
Well, the important thing for me, and we have a speaker who's just going to come on, who's going to be talking about farmed animals. The important thing for me is that, one, we need to stop the destruction of habitats, which the wild fishing causes. Two, we need to ensure that where we farm animals, we have the care of those animals as a clear principle. And I think David, who's coming after me, will have far much more to say on this. And as recently as his Group C4 have recently published on this, and I think what they have to say is very important in terms of particularly the word that's used in their document is flourishing, that animals in farm situations should flourish, and I don't believe farm fish are flourishing at the moment. In fact, we had a talk with a Czech group, Open Your Eyes, on the fishing of carp in the farming of carp in the Czech Republic recently, which is on our YouTube channel and on our podcast. And I thought that was very interesting in terms of the way in which people buy these fish live in barrels in the market, take them home, keep them in their bathtubs until they decide they want to slaughter them and consume their flesh. And I think that is really something we should be concerned about, because of the care, the stress of that fish, the dignity of that fish is important.
Okay, next question. And actually we have two from the same person here, but I'm going to link them together if I can and try and get them. And it's from Diana Ruiz Garcia Metamero. I hope again my pronunciation is okay. Diana, when you mentioned that it was accepted to eat fish to replace meat and that even religions accepted it, and then you say things have changed, is it still okay to substitute fish for meat? Does religion still have that point of view? And the question that goes on, do you think religions, and the Christian religion, the Catholic religion, is far from encouraging people to go vegan and therefore respect God's creation? How long will it take for our religions to accept that all animals deserve respect and have the right to law? Lots of questions all put together there, Diana. I hope we framed them okay for you.
Well, I'm not a spokesperson for the Catholic Church. The previous speaker was far better qualified than me on that score. And I can only give you my opinion. CCA promotes the substitution of meat and fish for vegetables, for vegetarian and vegan diets, which I think is an important thing that we need to consider, not just because we individually care about the fate of animals, because collectively as humanity we care about the fate of the world. We have a real issue with actually the nature of resource consumption in humanity, and one of those resources is fish aren't even regarded as individuals, they are regarded as tonnage, catch, or whatever. And I think that we need to look at the way we consume certainly across everything we eat. Tabaldo was making some important points about how even if we go back to eating vegetables and so on, you have to consider not just the primary impact that you're making on the claims that you make in terms of the resources you're using with what you eat, but also the secondary impacts in terms of what else has had to be produced in order to allow you to consume what you're consuming. And I think that we have to look at the nature of our consumption, and nothing gives us a clear indication of that than what's going on with fish, because the way in which we have taken fish as a resource from the oceans has actually led the marine ecology in many places to being close to collapse. We don't know what the full effects of this are, because we don't know how this ecology operates with respect to things which are more familiar to us, like, for example, climate change. So I think that as an individual, I think it's absolutely justified, Diana, for you to say, I'm not going to eat animals because it's the wrong thing to do. And I would absolutely support that. And actually, I think we need to look at ways in which we can support people doing that more in our country and across the world. But I think what's equally important is that as a humanity, as countries, as societies, as communities, we look at the way in which we're consuming, the way in which we're feeding ourselves, the way in which we're clothing ourselves, the way in which we're producing our habitats and the energy that we use, and make sure that we do it in a way which is sustainable in the future. And I think that moving away from meat and fish-based diets will be part of that.
Thanks. We have lots of more questions. I'm going to ask again, we're running short of time. We are behind schedule, and I don't want to get further behind schedule if I can. So I'm going to ask one final question, Gerald, if I may pass on, and then I'll hand back to Clara after your answer. So the final question for this session is, and again, it refers to the fact that we're marine environment as well as just fish. An estimated 100 million sharks are killed a year, mostly for shark fin soup. Whereas when humans are killed by a shark, which is very rarely, it's in all the tabloids and newspapers and media, etc. And this is from Paula. Sorry, I should tell her it starts from Paula. In my experience, they are still one of the most misunderstood creatures, the shark. Is this something CCA can take up with reference to resources? Once they are understood, they become admirable rather than monstrous. Obviously, the image that was encouraged by the film Jaws.
Yeah, and I can't remember the guy's name, but the guy who made Jaws actually regrets the fact that he created that image of the great white shark. I agree with you entirely, Paula. I mean, I think sharks are absolutely amazing creatures, fascinating, and I mean, human interaction with creatures like sharks, I think, is really problematic, because we treat them as playthings, as things, we can go along, we can go in a cage and go down with them and kind of be photographed with sharks. Isn't that wonderful? No, it's not. It's messing these creatures around. I think that again, we need to understand the role all creatures play in the marine environment. I mean, sharks are one which gets noticed, but there are lots of other creatures which are being eaten, which are being consumed, which are not noticed. Urchins, for example. Urchins are or at least certain parts of urchins, are a delicacy in some communities because of apparently, I wouldn't know this myself, their ability to improve your sex drive. Now, should we really be allowing the destruction of urchins for this? I mean, it is somebody's sex life more important than the life of an urchin? For me, no, I don't think it is. And I think we need to actually alter these practices and start recognizing, as Tebaldo says, and as it says in the Dato Si, and I would reiterate, that we are part of creation. And as part of creation, we have no rights, we have no we do not morally have the justification to judge whether other creatures should die for our benefit. We need to look at what we are doing in our own world.
Thank you very much for that, Gerald. I said that there are more questions, but we have to get back on schedule. So thank you all for your questions, and I'm handing back to Clara.
Thank you.